Recording in progress. It is November 5th. It seems like we all have a smile on our face because we got extra sleep last night, an extra hour of sleep. But now it's so dark, so deep and dark outside. So anyway, we have to overcome. Welcome to class 2. And my name's Dan. I'm on the board of Giving University. And I said this last class we just completed 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was our largest class we had graduated, and this class is even larger. And so we have a lot of help on these classes. Keem is really good at keeping us super organized. I know how to start Zoom and I know how to record, so I'm pretty good. And then we have Ariel also helping us teach. So tonight we're going to have Ariel teach us or give us talk to us about generosity. And I'm always humbled when I do these because many times I'm teaching or I'm in a group with people that are much more generous than myself. So, but we have a few things to share. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and start. And Ariel, I think you're here somewhere. There you are.
I am.
I shared with you, you're a co-host, you're official, all that good stuff.
Wow,
So
power.
Take it away.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dan. So thank you guys, first of all. And Keem or Dan, if you wouldn't mind taking over, just admitting people as they come in. That way I can focus in. And let me start with saying that I know this will be a little bit more of a technical class. So tonight we're going to be going over what is in essence if you wouldn't mind just muting for us while we're talking, that way we don't get any background noise and take away from the conversation. But anyway, tonight we'll essentially be going over what is the tax form for nonprofits who don't pay taxes. So, what would otherwise be their public document that would look very similar. I think if you guys have done your taxes before, you'll notice some similarities. And I want to say if taxes are something that are a little bit daunting, which I think if you're in a boat like me, even though I look at these forms regularly, they can quickly be very confusing. So I want to say from the outset, ask questions, ask lots of questions. Feel free to interrupt me. If you'd like, you can put your hand up or you can type in the chat. I'll try to notice that. But again, if I'm not noticing it right away, feel free to just, politely interrupt me. And I'll try to balance between moving quickly and getting through all the material and really diving down into these. But I do want to say this is about learning. And I want to say from the outset, the main point, what we're trying to do tonight is not to bore you with taxes. There is actually incredibly interesting things when we get through some of the more technical material. So if you can bear with us, learning how to see through the forest for the trees, so to speak, how to see an organization from a financial perspective, and then get something of an understanding of how well that organization is stewarding their finances. We know that money isn't the whole story for anybody, any individual or any organization. There's certainly a lot more that's going on behind the scenes with volunteers, giving their time, effort, energy that's not recorded on these forms. But we're simply equipping you guys, hopefully by the end of this class, with a set of tools that you could feel confident. And again, if you're not feeling confident, ask the questions that you need be. But by the end of this class, the objective is that you would each feel confident being able to take any publicly registered 501c3, which is a nonprofit organization registered with the U.S. government, and be able to know and understand how they're spending their money, where it's going, what it's doing, how much is being used where, what they're paying who. And most people are not aware that this stuff is actually legally, it's required for them to, if they are within certain means of registration. In other words, if they're over a certain budget, they have to file one of these forms. And many people don't know that it's publicly available information. So we want to correct that today and say it's actually publicly available. And the first thing I'm going to jump right into then is teaching you guys how to access that. So give me 1 minute while I share my screen. And we'll get started. Just want to make sure that I did it right. You guys can see high impact generosity and the slideshow. Great.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ariel.
Excellent. Let me get you guys on this side then. and we'll get right into it. Okay, so first of all, we want to teach you guys how to set up an account. With what we're going to be doing, basically, actually, before we begin that, I do want to go through and make sure that you guys are receiving. I know that we talked a little bit about that, but some of you guys have just joined the class, so I want to make sure. Is anybody here? Please raise your hand / speak up. Are you not receiving group emails from Team, Beth, or Dan? Has anybody not received those? I know a lot of you have. I just wanted to give a chance for speak now, forever hold your peace. All right. Have you guys followed us on social media? Because that is a great way to see what's generally going on at Giving University. I know we briefly talked about that at the end of class, but if you guys didn't know, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. You get bonus points. Not unfortunately, we're not keeping them, but you can know in your heart that you went above and beyond and are that A+ student if you go out and follow us on social media to find out what's going on. So you guys should have received instructions about accessing GuideStar. I want to see, has anybody already set up their account? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, excellent. You guys are ahead of the curve, so I won't spend much time on that. So is there anybody who has not set up an account? I just want to raise your hand if you have not. Brilliant. Okay, only a couple of you guys. So I'm going to go fairly quickly because most of you have gone through. And then do you have your printed copies or at least accessible electronic copies of your 990 analysis form? Is that, I'm seeing nods? Okay. If you guys do not know what that is, you look back at the email communication, you will find some PDFs basically for our 990 analysis form. And what we've done basically is just drafted out a neat little way for you guys to get on the inside of what's happening with the 990 form, which again, the 990 form is the equivalent of a tax return. Of course, nonprofits do not pay taxes, but it's their publicly registered tax equivalent form. So let's get right into it then. It's just going to be quickly go through. Based on the homework, which people in need are you most passionate about? I would love if you guys, a couple brave people, just give a little bit of your insight of what you found this week, what you thought about. What are some of the people groups that we discussed last week that you guys are most passionate about? Peter Nguyen, is it Nguyen? Would you mind coming off mute and giving us just a little bit of what you're passionate about when it comes to nonprofits or it comes to people in need?
Yeah, greetings everyone. Hey, missed last week. I was actually on a plane to my current location where I am. But the answer to your question is, as an educator for 25 years plus, I'm mostly passionate about students and mostly kids, especially my hometown of the city side of Ho Chi Minh City, which is where I'm currently in the countryside right now. Starting my project without Giving University just yet. So that's usually because these kids are the ones that are often malnourished. They also don't either have one parent or both. They don't have either both parents. And obviously they are the ones most in need because they don't have the skills. Whereas an adult who's, let's say, who's homeless, they still have the physical able to do some work. Where a kid, you can all imagine, you're 50 years old. I mean, you're not going to get too many jobs available for you to start making a living. So they're often uneducated, malnourished, and just don't have the support that I would like them to receive from myself.
Thank you for sharing. And I know I'm putting you guys on the spot here, so I just want to say that there's no condemnation coming for any of this. This is thank you for sharing, Peter. That was an excellent answer. And I want to say, if the rest of you don't have as well a thought out or developed view yet in terms of what you're passionate about, it's completely okay to say you don't know yet. We're only in the second class. That's not a problem. But I would love, if anybody else has got an answer that they would really like to share, I would love to hear about what you guys are passionate about. Have you found anything in the last week or even something that you came into this class with, people that you're particularly passionate about helping?
I'll share what I'm thinking about right now. I'm speaking here. There's so many people on the screen. Okay. My friend about 7 years ago began helping asylum seekers who are in detention and they shouldn't be. And she's been working to find lawyers for them. And when they are in detention, she's finding people to visit them and just give them some comfort. And when they get out, she's the one that gets them transportation to their family, gives them food, and gives them clothes to wear so that they can get to their family. And it's just a passion she has. And she started her own nonprofit, and she's just scrambling one step in front of the next for about 7 years. And I'd just like to help her see if I can strengthen her nonprofit profile, I guess.
Excellent. I love that vision. And I hope that by the end of this class, but certainly feel free to tap into me, to Dan, to Keem outside of class as well if you have any specific questions. But I hope even by the end of this class, you'll have a good understanding of what people can publicly see on her organization and what they're looking for, at least when evaluating in methods that we do. Thank you for sharing, Bonnie. Is there anyone else? Maybe one more? Anybody else want to share what they're passionate about?
I can go.
Please.
Also just Bonnie, I love that. Like so good and just so practical, even just the like showing up just to be a caring person, right? Because those folks are just so, yeah, all the things. So anyway, love that. My first inclination was just because I do a lot of trauma work, like folks who've been in trauma, which is probably the majority of folks living in third world countries because they have experienced things you and I have not, but I kind of struggled with it a little bit because I also feel like at times mental health to me seems like a privileged people thing. So I kind of was like vacillating between like that's my go-to, but also like I just freaking love children. And so yeah, just whatever that looks like in supporting kids that just don't get touched, kids that don't get their primary needs met, that are just that attachment piece is just so important, which I guess for me also ties into mental health. But so yeah, that's a really convoluted answer, but I'm kind of like vacillating between what that all looks like. So
Yeah, no, not convoluted at all. I can understand. Like I said, I think all of us, even by the end of it, or I know I myself gone through this class a number of years ago, now teaching it. Still, there's multiple things that kind of come together in different ways that I'm passionate about. And just because we don't have one thing or that one does not mean that, or even if you guys haven't worked it out yet, again, that doesn't mean that it's you're in a bad place. So I want to affirm that, but continue for the rest of you. And if you have not thought about the areas that you're passionate about, the people that you're passionate about, I encourage you guys based on the curriculum or the criteria we talked about last week. If you need to review that, please do. But go ahead and be thinking about the kind of folks, the kind of organizations that you want to do research on, and we'll equip you again today to be able to, by the end of this class, to tell what is an organization doing with its finances. So I'm going to go right. Again, just want to, some of this is what I've said earlier. There's no passion yet. That's okay. Just start with something that interests you, or at least you want to get to know something more about. So again, I want to just make sure that I don't skip over any of the details. So let's start with nonprofit terminology, because it does vary by country. Here in the United States, you're going to find the term 501c3, as I mentioned earlier. If that's code language, it's because it literally is code language. It refers to the tax code and the section of the tax code that these often these entities are registered under. This is not the only type of nonprofit, but this is the 501c3 be the main nonprofit that you guys will be seeing. And if you do find anything different, you can let me, Dan, team know, and we can help you. Hopefully, if not, all of their information will be publicly trackable. But if you do run into issues, please let us know early. If you're not finding it, or if you're finding something that's not a 501c3, you're not sure if it's a nonprofit or not, let us know early. Let us know right away. Don't spend a lot of time in the next couple of weeks and like figuring out, I couldn't find something. Come to us early on and we can help you. We do have a lot of experience in this area, and we'd love to help answer questions and get you to the right source of info. But let's just say for now, 501c3 will be the main government regulation that defines nonprofit status. And for our intents and purposes, that's going to be true. NGO is the term used abroad. A lot of times you'll find in other countries, especially Southeast Asia, the continent of Africa, NGO, non-government organization. Technically, I guess all private organizations would be non-government, but it generally refers to nonprofit or charity or humanitarian organization. So that's what you'll find overseas. You won't find the equivalent of 501c3 because again, that's American terminology based on our tax code. But you will find a lot of times this NGO attached to the organization. For our purposes, we're going to be focusing on American organizations, though, just so we can find that information available. But just so you know that they do exist abroad as well. And again, the IRS Form 990 is the annual tax form, which they basically, every organization within certain boundaries, 501c3s are required to file. So any questions there? You can go ahead and just blurt it out if you do. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Good. Well, let's get down then into some of the nitty gritty. There's a lot of common misconceptions, I think, among nonprofits. The first one I actually want to point out is that nonprofits actually can make money. I think a lot of times there's this understanding that nonprofits there's no profit whatsoever. And that's not really true. Actually, nonprofits can even sell things. They can have revenue. They can have net profit at the end of the year. They're just required to put that net profit back into the organization. I don't want to get too technical, but they don't have shareholder equivalent, I guess would be the, I'll probably leave it at that. If you guys do have more questions, you can ask me or we can follow up afterwards. But basically know that nonprofits can make revenue from the things that they sell or the services they offer to people. They have restrictions on what they're allowed to do with that profit. Can they pay employees? Yes. Oftentimes you will find there's many employees. This is true from some of the most famous nonprofits, like say Goodwill or Salvation Army or Red Cross, which we'll talk about later. There's a lot of employees, thousands of employees that are paid. And in the case of Goodwill, for example, they run the equivalent of a store, which you guys have probably been a part of. So they're selling items. Of course, those items are donated and there are restrictions again on them, but they certainly can have revenue, which they use then to help support the organization, pay employees, run programs, etc. Just want to eliminate those misconceptions. Basically, as I mentioned before, the money that is made at the end of the year must be in line with its nonprofit purposes. So what that means basically is it just must go back into the organization, and the government has restrictions on how that profit can be utilized. Any questions there? Again, you can feel free to stop me as I'm going, but I'm just going to continue to buzz through so we can get to the meat.
Wait, yeah, I kind of have a question.
Please. Yep.
I'm sure everybody's thinking it, but we all know like that some of these nonprofits, their CEOs make like a lot of money. And so I'm just curious, does the government not have like guidelines for that in terms of if you're running a nonprofit, like a peak of what you can pay your employees or CEOs? Excellent
question. The short answer is yes, they do have regulation, but we'll go into we'll get into some more of the details later when we see the employee compensation, how that can be quite surprising at times, and it has led to public scrutiny, including investigation from public officials and politicians. So the answer is yes, there are restrictions, but sometimes people feel that even when a company operates legally, that they're not necessarily operating maybe in the best way that they could, we'll say. So I think, as you guys know, even in any sector of the government, there can be people operating legally, but you still wonder, are they operating ethically, morally? So there's certainly rules on these organizations and how they spend their money. But I think you, Debbie, hit something on the head. You probably heard some of these organizations at times have been maybe called into question about how well they're spending their finances. And again, I wouldn't say that finances are everything, but hopefully today we're going to help really drill into equipping you guys with a set of tools that will help you evaluate, at least along a certain set of lines, so you'll be able to understand what is going on with these organizations. Does that answer your question, Debbie? Yeah. And I think we'll get to some more detail later. You'll find some of the answers to those questions that you had. All right. So how many do we have in the United States? We actually just recently updated this number. The organization, the tax code has become a mechanism to encourage and discourage behavior. Basically, the U.S. government decided that they wanted to have non-government organizations partner with them in doing public work, like charity work, humanitarian work. So there is incentives that they've offered, and we've seen incentives all over. Government often gives incentives for to encourage all kinds of behavior. So, for example, there's a mortgage interest deduction, which you guys might be familiar with if you do itemize your deductions, and that's to encourage home ownership and to help make it more solid. You get a tax benefit from that. There are also there's also, if you itemize, you can deduct your charitable contributions to 501c3 organizations. That's to encourage giving to these public humanitarian type organizations. So since nonprofits can't spend on things outside of its purpose, it should give you confidence that your donation won't be wasted. That's the idea behind the tax code. That's why these organizations don't pay taxes. I don't think it was developed out of nefarious purposes in any way. It was simply meant to give them a break from what would otherwise be a burden of giving to the public good. They're considered a public good in and of themselves. So the government wants to encourage the establishment of these types of organizations. And when done properly, we know that everything can be abused, but when done properly, these organizations are seen as a public good, helping the public, doing good work, and helping society in general. So how many nonprofits are there? We actually, as I mentioned before, we just recently updated this, and there are now 1.8 million, actually more than of these organizations operating just in the United States, registered in the United States alone. So very real talk. You can't give to all of them. There's just simply too much to research, too much to know about. So this is why we want to encourage you guys to find a few organizations, and we'll give you a few more parameters later, the ones that are local to you and ones that are within a certain level of financial revenue every year, because we want to make sure that they fall within a certain set of parameters just for practicality's sake, because quite frankly, if something is either too small or too large, it just becomes untenable to research. But we want to make sure, first of all, we want to start with something that's of interest to you. So find an organization that aligns with your passions. So when you find an organization that you're interested in, one of the first things you can do is start with their 990 form, which is publicly available on GuideStar. So you guys have all registered for GuideStar already, or at least most of you have. So what you'll look for on the GuideStar website is the form 990. And that should be available for any nonprofit that's over a certain revenue. And that should be available through GuideStar, the organization website that you guys registered for. Just want to quickly go through how to set up a GuideStar website for those of you who haven't already done so. You'll go to guidestar.com, and this is approximately what it will look like. You guys are going to click create account, and then you can type in information. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of you guys have done it. Thank you. No worries for those who haven't done it yet. Still time to do that, but go ahead and get on that this week so that you can get set up. Because again, GuideStar, once you have this account, you'll be able to type in the search bar up here kind of thing, and you will be able to look up a variety of organizations. They might not have every organization you've ever heard of, especially if it's not operating in the US, but there are many organizations that are available here. And again, if you do run into issues finding the organization you're thinking of that you want to research, please come to me, Dan, and Keem early. Don't wait, don't sit on it, because we might miss our window in terms of getting the research that we need. Sometimes it can take some time to find some of the more difficult it can sometimes be difficult to find the proper legal name for an organization if they have a different street name, for example, that we're used to calling them by. All right, any questions there before I move on? Okay, so in GuideStar, you'll find a number, you'll find a number of different things on their website right available. So if I just, for example, type in a certain organization, I'll get this basically public profile page, and you can see a number of different interesting facts right up front, like the ruling year would be the rule that they were officially started, officially registered with the IRS. You'll find this tax identification code here. Again, they don't pay tax, but this is their identification number. And then in that, it shows that they are official and legitimate with the IRS. What we're interested in right down here, you should find at the bottom right of their profile page, a button that says show form 990. That's what you're going to click on, and hopefully they have a few years. If they've been around since say 1997, they hopefully have a few years already uploaded to GuideStar. But if you do have any issues, again, come to us. Maybe we can do something about it. At least we can help find figure out if we're going to be able to track down this information.
Hey, there's a question
Go
in the
ahead.
chat.
Oh, good.
Can you see the chat or not really? It's-
I can here. Let me pull it up right now because I actually have a number of things going on here that I have. So I didn't notice it before you mentioned it. Thank you. So let's talk with, is it Huime? Is that the question you were referring to, Dan? Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I'm just going back to the
Oh,
chat.
yeah,
I see there's a
yes.
number of things I missed. Can you come off mute and give us a little detail about some of the question that you're asking, Huime? I'm sorry if
I think it's just
mispronouncing your name.
one question.
My name is Hiwame, and
Hiwame.
I was wondering, how do we find organizations that specifically relate to what we're passionate about? I have some ideas, like Gigi's Playhouse works with providing free programs for children with special needs, or there's Unity for Orphans, but I'm not quite sure how to find organizations that specifically help children in poverty.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what, like the specifics of the organization that you're looking for? Organizations that help kids in poverty in general, like with say feeding, or is it medical help, or is there specific things that you are passionate about, or is it just helping kids in general?
Helping kids who live in poverty specifically.
Okay. Dan and Keem, do you have any input here in terms of how Hiwame might find an organization that is helping kids in poverty?
Well, one thing you have to do, we haven't got to the rules part yet, but one of the guidelines is it has to be within 100 miles of where you live. And so GuideStar lets you do searches by local zip codes and cities. I think you just have to start kind of poking around in GuideStar and seeing what you come up with. You could probably poke around in Google also with those words and see what comes up, because you could probably define a little bit like kids poor help or something like kids poor help in St. Louis, for example, and something might pop up. And then you can start, if you find some legitimate names, then you can go into GuideStar and kind of look for the information that you want. I think probably what you have to do is let us go through these a little bit, and you'll see, because there's not an easy answer for that question. But I think it's just, you have to kind of do a little bit of research on Google or whatever you used for your searches, and maybe also your church or your friends. And also, I would assume if you have that interest, you might know of some already.
And I might start by considering. Sorry to interrupt you, Hiwame. I was just thinking about your question though, and I think I might start with asking what are some of the problems in my local area that kids are facing, and say, for example, if there's a high rate of homelessness, especially among children and families, you might consider researching organizations that are addressing homelessness. If there is, say, a problem with malnutrition or lack of access to good food, water, etc., you might find humanitarian organizations that are working in those specific areas. And I think you'll find, though, a lot of these organizations are willing to help kids, or a lot of times kids are the focus of a lot of organizations that are doing humanitarian work, whether it's addressing homelessness problems or lack of malnutrition problems, etc. Is that helpful, Huame?
Yes, it is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, let's quickly break down our 990 analysis tool. So again, bear with me. I know there's some technical detail. Please ask questions if you have them. But what this is in front of you is basically a scoring tool that helps us evaluate how well an organization, how efficiently they are stewarding their finances, meaning how much revenue is going towards the things that are in line with their purposes. So we can see here, all of this information is available on the 990 and refers to the 990. So what would, say for example, page number 1, we'll see later when we go evaluate 990, we're looking what is the program service revenue, meaning how much revenue is going into the programs, the services that an organization is offering. This measures how much of the revenue comes from charging for stuff. For example, are they doing, say, some type of therapy work? Maybe there is some, maybe there are staff like psychiatrists, psychologists on hand that might be charging. Maybe it'll be a discounted rate, or maybe it'll be full price, depending on who the client is. But you'll see what kind of revenue numbers are coming into the organization from their services that they are offering. I imagine that Goodwill, an organization that sells secondhand goods donated to them, you'd see a lot of different program service revenue things pertaining to different types of goods sold on their 990 form. Pages in section B right here in row B, we'll see the highest paid salaries. This is from page 7 and 8 in the 990. And in section C, we'll have a statement of revenue. This shows where the funding comes from in government grants. Again,
let me make a comment on the B. We had a question, I think, from one of you on how much compensation is happening. And so you may not have been aware, but pages 7 and 8, most of the time, will show you the top salaries of an organization. And I don't think there's a cap per se on what people can do, because with 1.8 million nonprofits, you find a lot of variety and a lot of people using nonprofits in a poor way. But those item B will really help you a lot in I think understanding what's going on with the nonprofit. Because that was good. That was a very good question, and I just wanted to make sure you knew early on. That's one thing that we take a really close look at.
Mm-hmm.
And the government regulations for nonprofit salaries actually are that they be reasonable and non-excessive. That's the extent of the guideline. So the non-excessive, of course, is open to interpretation. So this sheet is going to be helpful in terms of what given university standards are and some suggestions of what that kind of could look like.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because as I think you'll see in a few minutes when we get into the nitty gritty of some of these organizations, that though maybe there are caps in terms of an organization can come under scrutiny, for example, giving too much to their executives or employees. There are some surprisingly high salaries in the nonprofit world, which again doesn't tell the whole story, but it should be taken into consideration if I have $1 that I will either go to organization A or organization B, and they're both doing the same work. And at the end of the day, organization B is doing it more efficiently and less of the money is going to overhead, i.e. salaries, etc. Then maybe I'll likely consider giving my $1 to organization B. So I want to go down to row D real quick. Again, I'm just going to go through these. This is just an introduction. We'll get more into this later on this evening, but row D, so this is a statement of functional expenses. Basically, it shows how much of the organization expenses are giving grants to other organizations, meaning how much are they a pass-through organization. So you'll find that some nonprofits simply act as, I would say, like a middleman. For example, they receive money from donors or government grants, and they'll actually just simply funnel those out to other organizations. And I think that has its place. And certainly it's a service that it does good, I think, in some circumstances. Generally for GU, that will take down their overall score because that's not the type of organization we're looking to focus on for this class.
I think Brent had a question. He had his hand raised.
Please.
Maybe we
Thank you.
skipped by it already, Brent.
Oh,
I see it
no,
now.
sorry, it's Micah Brent's son. We've got the whole family over here. I was looking at page 8 on a 990 sheet. Just the expenses and everything. Maybe it's 11 actually. And just some of this stuff, I mean, it doesn't really make sense. Like line 22, what is depreciation, depletion? Like, what do some of these things mean? Maybe there's a place that I can go to kind of look up some more details on some of this stuff.
Yeah, excellent question. And I want to, from the outset, I warn you that you're asking good questions, and we can go through each of them, but let me warn you that there's going to be a lot of weeds to get into very quickly here. So on tax forms in general, there is probably far more detail than we could ever cover in this class. So I want to say that from the outset. To answer your question simply, depreciation it has to do with equipment, and in terms of just like say if I was to buy a piece of property and I would say that property goes down in value over time, like say, for example, a truck or something similar to that. And I would say, well, the truck is not worth as much next year or the year after. So I would depreciate it in value, showing on my tax form that I paid $100,000 for that, moving truck, but it's only worth $50,000 after 20 years of use or something like that. So that would be what depreciation is in that, of course. But as far as like a lot of different lines, you'll see a lot of things that I think for our purposes we'll probably skip over and just draw your attention to specific areas on the 990
I guess the only reason I ask is $557,000 of depreciation, depletion is a lot when that's a quarter of your total expenses. So I don't know. Maybe it's something to look out for if it's that extreme. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, it would be. Without context, I wouldn't be able to tell exactly what that is. But off the cusp, it seems to me that they purchased, quite a lot of equipment that is rapidly declining in value in that year.
Remember, this form is our analysis. And if that's something that is very important to you, you can make G and H, which would be your scoring. Because really the way to look at this is if you're going to give $100 to an organization, how can we help you decipher if they're using money well? And if, for example, your depreciation example is way out of line, then I think it helps you decide maybe you don't want to fund them. So there's a lot of lines. The tax returns are very complicated. Let's just put it that way. These are the 6 main areas that we take a look at because we think it gives us a lot of insight into what goes on. But there's a lot of technical stuff we don't really dive into, but it's up to you really, except for what you have to turn in for class is the exception. But for your own personal donations, you can decide to do whatever you want to do, obviously. Anyways,
answer your question?
We just don't have great answers because there's so many complicated pieces on these tax returns. We're just trying to simplify 6 areas.
Yeah, I hope that answers it at least somewhat satisfactorily. The answer, we're not trying to dodge it as much as say there's something like 22,000 pages of tax code for the IRS, and I can't remember the stats, but it would take well over a lifetime to really understand all of it. So what we're trying to do, I think, is say, well, let's stay away from rabbit trails unless there's something of interest that we want to follow, and that pertains to how a company or an organization is using their funds. Does that make sense? It was a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's see how that organization scores on what we got here too. That's a good idea.
So real quick, the last few lines before we kind of summarize what it is that we're doing here. I just want to draw your attention on page 10 of your 990 form. You'll find basically shows how much of their expenses are management and overhead. So that gives a summary for their overhead expenses. Overhead meaning their cost of administrating there. So how much, if $1 is donated to the organization, how much of it is going to the equipment, the salaries, the actually producing the goods or producing the services that they're going, and how much of that money is actually making it towards the people that they're trying to help. And then finally, how much of their expenses are allocated to fundraising. So these are the 7 areas that we want to focus on. Again, or 6 areas, I should say, that we want to focus on. As you brought up, I believe it was Brent, asked an excellent question about depreciation and other things. There might be red flags that are not caught within this. And again, just because an organization may not score super well with this form does not mean it's an evil organization or it's that an organization that you shouldn't get involved with. For example, certain organizations are going to be very small. They're not necessarily going to score really well on this because of just the nature of the way the numbers work here. But other organizations might be doing great work, but they have people for whatever reason, they're very costly to give the services that they're running, and it might not score very well on this. And that doesn't mean that they're not worth looking into, but this is going to help us evaluate organizations, especially organizations that are doing similar work. So maybe you have 1, 2, or 3 organizations in your local area that are all helping children. Say, for example, if you're interested and you do find couple different organizations, this we believe is going to give you a tool to help evaluate which organization is most efficiently using their finances and they're stewarding them towards the people and the causes that they want to help. So what you're going to do basically is you're going to do in the column, you'll see this 3rd column over. These give you specific instructions of what you're going to do on the 990 form. So in this case, you're going to divide line 9 on the 990 form, page 1. You're going to divide it by line 12. Does that make sense? This is going to be basically pretty simple arithmetic, but again, it can get complicated quickly because it's sometimes hard to find those specific boxes because when you go ahead and look, if you haven't already at a 990, it can quickly become daunting. As Brent pointed out, there's a lot of different stuff going on, and sometimes it's like hard to know what's going on behind the scenes. But basically, there's instructions in this column, and you'll follow them. And if you follow them, you should produce a certain value score right here. And then what you're going to do after you follow all these instructions here, fill in the boxes here, is that you'll get a certain score that will sum it up from the total, and it'll tell you just roughly how well this organization is scored according to our methods. Does this make sense? Everybody clear, at least on the instructions so far? We'll get into more detail, but is there any questions here? Okay. Well then, let's go into...
So sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I do have another question. I'm looking at the 990 form for Gigi's Playhouse, and I see line 9 on page 1, they have 0, but on line 12 they have like 3,000 or 4,000. What would I do if the dividing number is 0? Would I just put like not defined, or?
Dan, I believe you would put NA in that case. Is that the best way? And you just simply wouldn't add it there in that box on this page, I mean?
No. When it's 0, it's just whatever your value is over there. Your value is 0. And so in number 1, if the value is 0, that's less than 0.8. So they would get a 1, a score of 1. You always put, there's always a number that goes in there. 0 just means 0.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, Dan. Yeah, that makes sense. Is that clear to everyone else? Go ahead, Dean.
Tammy also had a question.
That was my question also. Sorry, I've lost my voice, so, but that was my question also.
And there's a
Oh.
couple other instances where that might be the case. So if one of your numbers is 0, the answer is going to be 0, and you just use the point value for that.
Can I
As you
ask
can
a
see,
quick question? Sorry.
Yeah,
Ariel.
go ahead,
Yeah,
Brent.
like on ENF, it's
yeah.
if zeros are threes, so yeah, zeros have value most all the time.
Just a quick question. So if my organization that I picked only has their 990 for like up to 2020, does that mean that organization may or may not exist anymore? Or I'm just curious how up to date they are with their 990 forms. Typically.
well,
Typically, they're
there-
2 years old. They're 2 years old. It's typical.
and I would say in that case, use the most recent one. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's, to answer your first question, that they may or may not still be around. But if you have good reason to suspect that they are still active, then you can use one that's several years old still and get some good information from it.
But give them a phone call if you don't think they're around.
Yeah, very wise.
Can I add to that? Because we did come across that with the last group a few times. And like Dan is saying, that's usually 2 years old. Either the IRS is behind or it hasn't gotten to GuideStar yet. But if you find one and they score well, even if it's an older tax form, say it's 2019, and they score well, and you like that organization, it's worth reaching out and giving them a phone call and saying, do you have a copy of your most recent 990? They usually, it's going to be public information anyway, so they should be pretty willing to provide that to you. And a lot of organizations, because they realize that the IRS and GuideStar are behind, will actually go ahead and post their most recent financials on their website. So usually there's a section for transparency or for more information on the organization. So don't give up if you don't find a really current one on GuideStar. Go ahead and chase it down a little bit before you decide to move on to a different organization.
That is an excellent point, Keem. And I want to encourage you guys with a little bit of encouragement of just the mentality I think you guys can imbibe. If calling an organization makes you at all nervous, I want to encourage you guys that many charitable organizations are proud of what they're doing, and they have staff that they recognize that this Form 990 is a part of their public service. It's basically, as Keem said, being transparent, and they're not only required to do it. I think a lot of good organizations are proud of the way they're spending their money, so they want to share this information if they think that it may, because again, who is reading these? It's people who are interested in contributing to their organization financially, and they recognize that, and they're actively seeking to provide you with this information. So I don't think that you should at all be nervous or feel like you're imposing upon these organizations. If you were to call and say, hey, I couldn't find more recent 990 than 2019 on GuideStar, can you please supply me with some of the more recent financial materials? And I think you'll find a lot of people very ready to simply hand that over, especially nowadays with how easy it is to do electronically. Great question, Brent. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions along that line? I want to be clear about what we were talking about earlier. So if you have a score of 0 here, so you would simply write down 0, and you'll see here that the scoring, that anything less than a 0.8, decimal 0.8 is going to be 1 point. So then their actual score here, if you had a 0 in this, in when you divided line 9 by 12, it would actually just be 1 point. I don't know if that's immediately clear, but that's how you'll score then. And so at the end of the day, you'd add 1, say they got a 3 here, so that'd be a 4. They got a 3 here, that'd be 7. Got 1 here, that'd be 8. Does that make sense what I'm doing here? I hope it. We'll get more in detail too when we do one of these together. Okay.
Yeah, let's get to
Yeah.
a couple of them.
Yeah. Just real quick, want to point out that some of the parameters for our organizations, our nonprofits that we're focusing on for GU. We want the organization to be between annual revenue between 200,000 and 60 million. So that means that they're bringing in annually from grants or from program services more than 200,000, but not more than 60 million. There's good reasons for that. We won't get into all of them here, but basically we don't want the organization to be too small or too large, because unfortunately it just really doesn't, it's hard to research and find materials on organizations that are less than 200,000 and 60 million. It just kind of, we get into organizations that are doing different causes that kind of are beyond the scope of what we're trying to do for this class. Is that clear?
Yeah, and we do give you some grace on those numbers, just so you know.
Fair. But come to us again. If we find an organization, come to us early, come to us often. Me, Dan, Keem, we want to help you guys. We're not here to just say no, and good luck. We want to help. So if you're finding that your organization is close to these numbers, yeah, we can, as Dan said, give you some grace. All right. So let's just we'll go right into a Form 990. I'm going to show you just a quick snapshot. You guys, if you've looked at a Form 990 yet, you might be familiar with this first page. So this is the first line of what we're going to do on line A, right? So on page 1, you'll find a whole list of numbers, and this is just a segment right here. This is just a snapshot, a screenshot of their Form 990 form. And as you can see, even from this, it could quickly get overwhelming. We don't want to focus on all the stuff right now. I know there's going to be a lot of words here that may not make sense, but what we're going to focus on is specific lines that tell us specific things that we want to know. So first of all, we said line 9 on page 1 is our program service revenue. That is measures all how much of the revenue comes from charging stuff, right? So their total revenue, we're going to say the program service revenue divided by their total revenue. So their total revenue would include what? Grants, charitable donations, etc. Their program service revenue would just be selling stuff or selling services, like say, for example, therapy or Goodwill sells used goods, right? This is specific things. So you're going to divide these two, and then you're going to say, again, if it's less than 0.8, you're going to give 1 point. If it's between 0.6 and 0.8, you're going to give 2 points. And if it's greater than 0.6, it's going to be, less than 0.6. I apologize.
Let's do this, class. On your little sheet that you printed out, I want you guys to write down their score on this line.
Oh,
Online
good
B.
idea. Yeah.
So
Let's
tell
go through
me,
it together.
take a second and tell us what their score will be.
Yeah. So in this case, you'll see that this organization that we looked at, when you divide these two numbers, so we took 16 million, this number right here, and we divided by 17 million, this number on this line, and we got 0.95. Do you see how we did that? On a calculator, you should get a decimal number. And because this is greater than 0.8, we're going to give it
Hold
1
on.
point.
Oh, okay. I wanted to see what people gave it, but anyway, it's okay.
Oh, my apologies.
We'll do it on the next. We'll do it on the next one.
I do want to, if you guys would, a couple of you come off mute and just quickly give us the numbers that you got. If you don't mind sharing, if you've already done those calculations.
0.94814, etc.
0.94. So that's going to be just under this one, this example that we have here. So that, what number would you give that one?
I was just dividing the numbers you have on the screen, but it was 0.948, so it would round up to 0.95.
And then what's the score they get?
They would get 1 point.
Okay.
Wait, no, they would get.
That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for.
Excellent.
We want to break it down to the simplest as easy as we can, but I know it gets really, your eyes get all mixed up on all these numbers for sure.
Is it clear what we're doing so far? Has anybody tried to divide these numbers? They just tried to do it now and got something really strange. And raise your hand. You don't understand what you did. That's totally fine. There's no shame here.
It's dividing.
Okay. All right. Everybody's clear? Give me a thumbs up. Hunter, is that clear? Okay, excellent. You guys are a bright crowd. Well done. So then, this is a different example, but you'll see very different numbers. So on this one, their total revenue is 15 million, but only 284,000 is from program service, meaning what they sell, the services. So we're going to give this one, it's only going to have 0.02. So if you had this number here, what would you give it as a score? Anyone? Go ahead and write it in the chat. What would your answer be? Oh, yeah, I'm seeing, yeah, holding them numbers. Perfect.
And the little printed sheet you have, it becomes your worksheet. And it's very helpful if you write it down as you go, if you get the right places. But yeah, because we got 2%, we got 0.02. It's really the same number, same thing. But people think in terms of numbers in a different way.
Yep. Yeah, and does it make sense? So we're going to give it a score of 3. And the reason is because it's below 0.6. So 0.02 is less than 0.6. So again, we're going to, if it's over 0.8, we give it 1. If it's between 0.6 and 0.8, we'll give it 2. Below 0.6, we'll give it 3. Is that clear why we gave it 3? Anybody not clear on that? Have any questions? Feel free to ask them. Again, this is the time to really delve into this.
Yeah, and the reason we like to give it 3 is because they're not making money from they're not making a whole bunch of their money by selling stuff. They're actually doing what they're supposed to do.
And again, the rating system we've devised is to help us judge by our criteria if it's an organization that we want to help support. So it's kind of a quick and dirty way to just get through their financials and figure out, is this an organization that I want to continue to research and really delve into / make an application to GU about. Okay, so we're gonna move on then here if there's no more questions. I just wanted to highlight a couple things. So this is a little bit of extra diving into to get a little more detail on what our organization has done. So on part 3 and page 2, you can often see their accomplishments. So read, if you have one in front of you, go to page 2 and read 4A, 4B, and 4C. You'll see a little bit of what the organization's activities are and their accomplishments. This is what they'll basically put as their best foot forward of what we're doing as an organization. So this can help you understand, are all these activities that they mention in line with your passions? Or is there perhaps another organization you might like better? So ideally, we want to be passionate about at least some of these activities, if not all of them. And again, I'm going to show you right here then what I'm talking about. So this is page 2. This is a screenshot from page 2, part 3. And we'd see from this organization that their mission is providing after-school science and math education and college prep for poor, bright high school students. All right, so that would be in their own words what they're doing, and you can see some of their accomplishments right here in 4A. Student educational activity includes stipend payments to students, fees for student activities like museum admissions, etc., classroom instruction, SAT, and other training. So you get the idea. This organization is giving you a little bit of snapshot into what they're doing. This is not so much a financial thing. Go ahead.
And one comment on this is sometimes they leave this blank. And so and we're not using this page to score them. This is kind of like extra credit scoring. But if they leave 1 and 4A blank, you probably have to go to their webpage to kind of get an idea of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're very sketchy in these two sometimes.
And that can sometimes be a red flag, right, Dan? I think you've seen some in your day.
Well, it means they're doing their tax returns kind of fast. So I think the point on this page is it's a little extra credit information. We're looking for how many units. We're looking for cost per unit. So these guys are educationally helping 20 students, I'm sorry, and it comes out to $5,000 per student. And again, if you're looking at two similar organizations, this might help you maybe decide on who you want to invest your grant with, based on the unit. Now it gets a little more complicated than that, because you have some nonprofits that are very intensive as far as needing help and support, and then you have some that, like doing food, you get real low numbers per person because a meal is, way cheaper than an education. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know, sometimes these are not filled out.
Mhm.
And you can knock,
Mhm.
you can ding them down a little bit if you want, that's fine.
But this is, again, the whole purpose of this is try to get an x-ray into an organization and how well they're stewarding their finances. It might not be a deal breaker, but I think it is important as we look through this to understand, well, what are they doing? So if I understand, like, okay, so they have 20 students in their program, which they mentioned here, and they're spending 110,000, which ends up being 5,531 per student. Okay, I can do, quick in my head. If I had 5,000 to spend on somebody, would that be about, maybe an estimation of what I would, how I would use my fees? Or, for example, what would I be able to do with $5,000 for a student? Would I be able to do all that they list? SAT training, getting student backpacks, getting student meals. It might not be completely like thorough in terms of their investigation, but at least it can help you. If this number was, for example, $50,000 per student, we might raise some questions. Really, you're spending $50,000 on a student. That's okay. Maybe it's worthwhile, but maybe that could be something that you have a phone call about. Because again, you don't need to have a phone call and be a type of interrogator per se, but you can simply, oftentimes organizations, again, if they're really proud of the way they're spending their money, you can raise a simple question. Say, I noticed that you're spending, X amount of dollars, and it comes out to about, $50,000 per student, we'll say. And can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing with each student and the prices and where that money is going? And I think an organization that's really utilizing their finances well will be first of all, will know the answer to that question. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And if they don't, I think, it tells you a little bit of organization. Again, if they don't know, or if they're reticent to share, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a deal breaker. But I think these types, I would expect an organization that is not using their finances well, not to have a good handle, either one, to not be aware of how they're spending money, which is a problem. As we know, even personally, if you don't know where your money is going, it's likely not going to really good places. That's just a personal thing in terms of personal stewardship. But even worse is if I'm, being intentionally nefarious about how I spend my money, I might be very reticent to tell others about it. Doesn't necessarily mean that, but I see that we only have about 30 minutes here, so I am going a little bit slow on the front end. So I'm going to speed up a little bit, but again, I want to encourage you guys to ask questions if you have them. So I think you're getting the hang of it, though. I can see you guys are a very intelligent bunch, and a lot of these things are rinse and repeat type things. So again, we're just going to be looking for specific information in boxes, and we're going to be then doing some math and come up with a score on the other end. So I'm going to go right into then on salaries. So what we want to basically do here is we want to understand on pages 7 and 8, you'll see that all of the, first of all the executives of an organization are listed there, at least they should be, and their compensation should be listed. And then you'll find later on, you can see one of the boxes is for other employees. So you can see basically a combined amount for how much the organization is paying all of their employees. You won't necessarily find the names of all the employees there. These are just, you'll only find the names of the executives, but at least you'll find, or really quickly, I think you'll find that the executives are usually the highest paid employees. So what we, for GU, are concerned with is how many employees are paid more than $170,000 US dollars per year. And this is going to then, again, give them a score of a certain amount. So for example, if we have 3 or more employees paid more than 170,000, how many points would you give them? Can I have someone put it in the chat or come off mute? if we had an organization, Alex, if we had an organization that had 5 employees that were paid more than 170,000 per year, which of these three numbers, 1, 2, or 3 points would you give them?
1 point.
1 point, exactly. Because if it's greater than 3, we're going to give them 1 point. If they had, Brad, if they had only, say, 2 employees that made 170,000 per year, but everybody else made less than that, how many points would you give them here? And you can go ahead and come off mute if you want. I know I'm putting you on the spot. If you don't know, it's not a big deal. We can talk through it. But again, this is not a... Oh, Brad, I think you're on mute. Can you come off mute? Okay, no worries. Not a big
Just
deal.
do it with your fingers then, 1, 2, or 3.
Hey, Ariel, go back one slide for me.
Sure,
Real
sure.
quick. This is the one that really sorts them out really quick for you. And I just wanted to, Ariel's speeding up a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure you knew sometimes this page is blank. And if it's blank, you might want to go look in other parts of the tax return. There's a lot of nonprofits where that is actually true, but it's a little bit of a flag. And then the thing to take, look at is, you think it's a fair, our evaluation is fair. Sometimes you have to take into account how big the organization is and how small it is. And so I just wanted to see you kind of a little bit of background on this, this number. So you can go back, Ariel, to where you were. I just wanted to make sure you guys get these. Some of you are new to class. You do get a PDF of all these slides. And that way you can, go back and double check in case we had to speed up on some of the information.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, though. Thank you, Dan. Is this clear, though? So if there are less than 2 employees at the organization that are making 170, so say there's just one employee that makes 250,000 a year, but the rest make only less than 170,000, would give the organization 3 points in this particular box. Does that make sense? And again, this is the table that we just discussed above. Any questions on that?
I just have a really quick question. Looking at the Form 990, there's like 3 columns of compensation. Do we add all 3 of those to equal the total compensation, or are we just looking at
what page are you on?
Page?
You're looking at a tax
7.
return, I take it.
Yeah.
Which
Page-
column are you asking about? Because you can just go by column D.
Yeah,
I
I was wondering if you add D, and because I'm seeing numbers under D and F, and I was wondering if you add those or if you just look at D.
I don't see a D and F on this page.
I don't know that it's included every time, Dan, but I think F is additional compensation, right? Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Okay, we cut the page off. Okay. Go by whatever's
Yeah.
highest. Go by the high number.
Go by the high number, yes, but I think the answer is yes, Alex. Go ahead and add them together, because that would be compensation that's not necessarily included. W-2 is what they're being paid on their paycheck. Additional compensation would be, say, did they buy him a BMW to drive around in, or did they fly him to different places, and they're having to report that. So that on, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we want to include that as part of the compensation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been asked that before, but yeah, that should, I think you'll know.
Okay, thank you.
It's mostly seeing if there's 2 people really, if you're really looking for 2 people really in excess of 170, no matter how you put it together.
That's a good point. Yeah, maybe it's not best to strain over like split
I mean,
hairs.
if they travel, they might have to travel because that's what they do. But anyway, no problem.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe I'm probably being a little too detailed there. But if there are any questions about specific examples you guys have, please, Alex, come to us. Anyone come to us, and we can look over it together, and we can hopefully come to some good conclusions. The main thing we're trying to figure out, though, here is how many employees are making over 170,000 a year. All right, then moving on, we're gonna see just real quick. You can see from this 990 form, this is back in 2012, so already 10 years ago. We have quite a few employees, or I should say, CEO slash officers of the company making very healthy salaries here. So this can tell you, again, not necessarily deal breaker in and of itself, but this will get them. If you guys look at that real quick, what score would you give these guys just off the top of your head? A 1, exactly, because they have very healthy salaries here, many salaries over 170,000, more than 3, and so that's going to give them a lower score. All right, and then it goes on. So it goes on from page 1. This is now page 2 of their salaries, and you can see that many people in this organization are being paid very well. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that the organization is terrible, that we should not have nothing to do with it. This is actually for the American National Red Cross, which is a very famous organization. You guys have probably heard it in the nonprofit world, and I think they do good work, especially in terms of hospitals and blood work. But it does go to show you, for me, it was eye-opening. Okay, there's, it is interesting to see that a lot of what they get, again, they're getting their revenue from different sources, not just government grants and not just donations. They're actually selling items and stuff, which is interesting to see, that they sell donated blood to hospitals, et cetera, that, there are things that they're doing to make money. But, there is quite a bit of that money going towards salaries. So it is something to take into consideration. You can ask yourself, is this where I want my funds to go to? Or is there maybe another organization doing similar work that I might think is doing more efficient work, doing the same stuff, but more efficiently / being better stewards of the funds that they're giving.
If this number is surprising to you, would you raise your hand for me?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
were you guys all thinking this is normal?
These do you mean the over 300 numbers? If these numbers are surprising as compensation amounts?
Yes.
I was surprised by them. I'll raise my hand.
Okay.
I was surprised too, even though I'm the one who brought up the original, saying that this is not surprising, right? But it's disturbing to me, and especially that many people making that kind of money.
Yeah.
Sorry, but when we can't even pay our teachers to live in the neighborhoods they teach, I don't know how to make okay with that.
Yeah, I think the point is this is one of the organizations that opens your eyes a little bit to what we're doing. And if we do their class just for this, it's maybe even worth it. The thing that we are careful with is we say you can, feel free to give to the Red Cross, but this is what's going on with numbers 10 years ago. And we're probably just a little lazy and haven't updated our slides. But the other thing we do is we look for organizations that do what they do on a disaster that are good. And this is way out of line to me. But we look and try to find somebody for you. Like, let's say there's an earthquake somewhere or a big hurricane. There are good organizations that don't have these kind of numbers. And so the thing you want to do is as a good donor and a good person that gives money to organizations is look at this kind of stuff before you donate your money.
And Dan, just to clarify, and I may have missed it, but you're saying that because this is the American National Red Cross that we're looking at. I don't know if I might have missed it when Ariel was pointing that out, but that's why Dan is saying.
At the very top of the page, it's the American Red Cross. It's on the top.
So if you want to support an organization that does good work in the same area or the same type of work as the Red Cross, Given University is able to suggest other organizations that you could look at if that's one of your passions.
Yeah, or you'll figure one out too. I mean, we're not saying we're the only ones, but we just want you to be careful and know what's going on. And that makes really the value of this class, just doing this boring tax return stuff, because it really tells you the story underneath the hood of what's going on with a lot of organizations. Sometimes you work for an organization, you get a little nervous looking up your own organization because you haven't really looked at it for a while. So anyway, but it's just good information. And I know we got to
Can I
keep
ask you a
going.
quick question, Dan?
Yeah, go ahead.
just, let's say you pay your CEO $100,000, but, you know, which looks great on these 990 forms, but he's got like a, you know, full expense account. He can go out to eat, go wherever he wants, paying for all the gas, like everything's comped. Maybe they're even mismanaging funds. Like, is there a way to even know, you know, if they're just showing a salary of 100, is there any way to know any sort of other mismanagement? Because
Well,
I know that's
you look at,
true
you look at,
in
you
some
look at column F.
organizations.
Yeah, you look at column F, like somebody suggested, and I was interrupting rudely, but column F kind of tells you where that's going on.
Yeah, even if they've got like a platinum rating, they still could be doing that for sure.
Well,
Which,
a
I mean, that's probably,
platinum rating is GuideStar's rating. You got to remember that's their rating,
Yeah.
GuideStar. We rate it a little different than GuideStar does. I don't
if
know
I'm not-
what
That's
rating,
good.
I don't know what rating GuideStar gives these guys. I've never really looked at it, but I mean, we're just telling you what the numbers are. Or we're helping you see what the numbers are, I guess the better way to put it.
as best we can.
And
Well,
I think
tax returns really give you some data.
if I'm not mistaken, most of GuideStar's rating actually has to do with their transparency, just simply the amount of documents that they have on GuideStar. So it doesn't necessarily make a judgment call about how well they're using their finances, how they're paying employees. I don't believe it goes into any of that. The
Yeah, I
platinum
don't,
gold rating.
yeah, I
That's
don't
more
know.
to do with, do they have 5 or 10 years of 990s / are they, you know, making the information available?
Yeah,
I think that's most of the rating.
yeah, I don't know, but it could be.
Yeah. Great question, Brent. And the answer is if they're hiding something, you know, they could be leaving it off here. Like Dan said originally, sometimes you'll find this whole section blank and you have to dig into the 990 and it'll be like included in a footnote at the end kind of thing. That's a red flag immediately. But legally, they have to report salaries of officers. And a lot of times you'll find this column here, column F, will have additional expense type things that they're legally considered compensation. For example, if they're giving them some type of retirement package or deferred comp, something like that would generally fit into this category. Any questions on that though?
One way they do hide it is if there's a lot of zeros. Sometimes there's contracts set up with people where they're hired as a contractor, and so that's the way they get around the W-2 numbers.
Yeah. And
Anyway, you
hopefully
just have, if you see a bunch of zeros, if it's all blank here, it may be somewhere deeper, or maybe they are all working as volunteers. That, I mean,
Yeah.
that's very possible.
And come to us if you have any questions. Okay. This is just quickly a little bit of interesting news. This is from some time ago, but this was a senator actually investigating Red Cross because basically they had claimed that something of about 9% of their donations were spent on humanitarian programs, but apparently their office, the senator's office, found that it was something more like 25%. So basically, it was saying that that they were saying a lot less of the money was going to the people that it was supposed to be helping, and a lot more was going to overhead that they were what they were reporting. So again, I don't want to just beat up on one organization, but I think Red Cross is an example of an organization that it's a household name that everyone has heard of, but you can see just because it's big and popular doesn't mean that it's, you know, run the best. In fact, sometimes we'll find that over time, what was once a phenomenal organization, you know, can slowly slump towards inefficiency and corruption, even maybe unintentionally, maybe just misspending money, or maybe intentionally misspending money. So that's why we look at the numbers. We want to hopefully get an X-ray vision into how people are spending their money, or at least organizations are. Okay, so in the final time we have here, guys, I'm just going to blast through a couple of these things that highlight what we need to in the last 10 minutes. I'm sorry that we've been going a little slower, but I think you guys are getting the hang of this. It's really just a rinse repeat cycle. You got to look for this, follow the instructions. If you do have questions, we can follow up. But basically, we're going to go through their revenue. So we're going to find out where the revenue is coming from. And then we're going to find out if they're primarily funded by government grants. So that's the purpose of this line. And that's found on page 9. So we want to hopefully get organizations that are not so dependent on the government, because government regulation could change and that organization could collapse in a hurry. If 95% of the revenue is coming from government grants, the government decides suddenly that they don't want to fund organizations like them, that all of a sudden makes them at risk at losing or going under as an organization. So that's the reason for, or that's the primary reason for this score. Again, when you find it, you'll find it on page 9, and you can see that in government grants is right here in 1E, and the total grants is on line H. So you just divide those two, you'll get a number and you'll score accordingly. It's very similar process to the ones we outlined above. I'll give us some time at the end for questions, but I'll just go through these a little bit quicker so we can make sure that we at least touch on some of these things. Functional expenses, very similar. This is basically just how much of the organization, how much of the funds of the organization are going to other organizations. So basically, are they just a pass-through organization, or 90% of their grants that they're getting going to other 501c3 nonprofit organizations? Well, that just means they're kind of a middleman. We don't want to focus on those organizations as much. So we want that score to be good. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean a deal breaker. Some of it's allowable, but we don't want to primarily focus on those organizations. Again, you can see here that you can point out in this box. I'll leave you with these, or you'll have these slides. You can go over them in more detail, because I do want to just leave some time here at the end. We can go through a 990 form if we have a few minutes at the end. And of course, we'll leave some time for questions if you guys want to stay longer. Going through then, actually, I want to move down through this because I've already gone over this. So again, highlighting what we're doing. First line is program service revenue. Second line is salaries. Third line is the funding comes from government grants. This fourth line, D, is from their functional expenses, how much is going to other organizations. They're just a pass-through entity. And this shows how much of their expenses are their revenues going to overhead. And then line F shows how much of their expenses are allocated to fundraising, meaning marketing, spending money to make money. And some of that's necessary, we acknowledge, but we don't want organizations with a very high fundraising budget where almost all their funds are going to just simply raise funds. Is this clear on what we're doing here and why we're doing it? Are there any questions that you guys have? Okay.
Let me make
Okay.
one comment. We stopped the official class at 7 because that's our commitment, but we will stay an extra 15 minutes. So we go a little bit quick, and then if you want to stay longer, we'll get a little more. We'll answer more questions, and we'll also probably score 1 or 2 of these samples.
Yeah, very excellent point. We'll stay a little bit longer for those who do want to. I want to in summary, though, I want to clarify, you guys, that just because an organization has a low score according to the methodology we've created doesn't mean it's a bad organization. All right, not necessarily. It might mean that, doesn't necessarily mean that, but it does leave open the question of, could they use their organization, their finances better? So maybe they're not run as well as they could be. All right. So that's what we're trying to find out here. So sometimes they actually just simply means that they don't rely on donations, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe they get paid for their services. It's not necessarily bad if that money is going towards good use, that they get paid for it. So if your organization scores low, there may be a story that explains it. That's what we want to emphasize here. So do some investigation, have fun with it. Maybe there's a good reason. And that's where you can call them up and say, I've noticed that you spend this and this, and they'll be surprised. I bet they'll be blown away because maybe someone has never asked these questions before, and they might have an opportunity to elaborate. Well, this is why. And you can find out, okay, they have a good reason for what they're doing. And then you can come back to Dan Keene and ask, is this acceptable? And I can help point you towards a good direction. Maybe an organization is doing better, or maybe we can accept that. Any questions before we wrap up? I just want to make sure that everybody's understood the stuff that we've done so far, and then we'll go into a 990 together and score it. Okay. Well then, let's go up. Give me 1 minute.
And Ariel, while you pull that up, I will let everybody know ahead of time that part of your homework is to complete 2 analysis forms for 2 different organizations and send those in. So that this is walking you through the exercise that we're asking you to do for your homework, because this is a necessary piece for your final grant proposal and presentation. So we want to make sure that you have some practice doing it and are comfortable doing it. And we start off early so that you have several weeks to kind of get the hang of it.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent point. Okay, guys. So this is an actual 990 form from 2017, the tax year 2017. This is Royal Family Kids Incorporated. All right. So this would be an example. Again, a lot of information here. This is actually not necessarily one that's the most complicated. It gets way worse than this, believe me. But that said, as you can tell, there's 34 pages here. It can get quickly overwhelming. So we just want to draw you to that stuff, first of all, to highlight what we're talking about. So we said, everybody
Ariel,
have, please.
for those of us who are over 40, would you mind using the full width of your screen? Just go ahead and increase the
Absolutely.
zoom in on your page. Thank you.
Thank you. I should ask, is this coming in clear? Because I see a certain zoom on my screen, but you guys are, no pun intended, on Zoom. And sometimes it's not as clear on your end. Is it clear to everybody? Okay. Okay. So if everybody has a copy of their 990, let's go ahead and do this together. I want you guys to score. So this is the first page, page 1, and we have line 9. So I'm going to scroll down here. You guys see line 9, and we've actually highlighted it for you. So I want you to divide line 9 by line 12. So you're going to put 9 on top, line 9 value on top, divide it by line 12. Okay, everybody got a score there. You should get a decimal score, and then you go to how to score on that column on your 990 analysis form, and then it'll tell you again less than 0.8, between 0.6, 0.8, and then, oh sorry, I keep saying that backwards. Apologies. Scratch that. If it's more than 0.8, if it's between 0.6 and 0.8, or if it's less than 0.6. All right, write down your score. Now we're going to go to pages. We're just going to skip down here. Excuse me while I zoom out just a little bit. Go to page 7. I think this is page 7. Yep. Yep. We'll zoom back in. So this again is the highest paid salaries. Again, we're approaching 7 p.m. here. So I do want to just check in with Dan and Keem to see if you guys have any more announcements that you would like to make before we formally end class. We have 2 minutes left.
No, go ahead and finish this one though.
Okay, yeah, will do. Okay, great. So you guys write down a score. When we divide, what we're going to do now is we're going to go down to page line 1D. We're going to count how many people are earning more than 170,000 per year. Hopefully you guys can still see that. All right, you guys got a score. Now you're going to take that, then you're going to plug it into your value. In this case, I'll give you the answer. It's less than 2 individuals, so we're going to give it 3 points. All right, just make sure that there's no salaries on the next page. Yeah, no, there aren't. Okay. All right, then we're going to go to page 9. And page 9 is for the government grants. So our instructions on page 9, line 1E. 1E, government grants, blank. So that means they don't have any. They don't have any government grants. So you're going to put 0 divided by what, doesn't matter what the number is, it's going to be 0. So your answer is going to be 0. So you find your how to score section, put your number down accordingly. Okay. And then we're going to go to page 10. I know we're moving a little bit quick, but we'll talk about it at the end here, what we got for final score. So page 10 is a pass-through, how much of their statement of functional expenses. So we're going to take line 1, functional expenses.
It's 1B. I think you got to go up on this one. I think.
Yeah. 1B. Yep. Program, you're right. Thank you. So program service expenses 1B. And we're going to divide it by their total expenses. 25B. So 1B is, again, blank. It means 0 divided by 25B. Total functional expenses. So this, again, the 1B is saying how much of their organization functional expenses went to other domestic organizations or other organizations. Okay. All righty. Now we're going to go also on page 10, line 25C, the third column, how much of their expenses went to management and overhead. So in this case, you see this number, line 25C, that's their total overhead. And divide 25C by 25A. This is 25A right here, the 1.8. Okay. And then again, you're going to write down a number to score it. And then the last one is also on the same page, line 25D. 25D is their fundraising expenses. This is their total fundraising expenses, $79,097 reported, divided by line A, which is their total functional expenses. You're going to get a score, and then you're going to give it the points accordingly. Okay, I know we went through that fairly quickly, but does anybody want to come off mute, and does anybody have their calculations done and want to come off mute and give us what they had as a final score? Don't worry about it if you're worried about the fact that you might not got the right answer. We're all learning together here. This is the first time we've done it. It's only uphill from here.
Yeah, I have the final score as 18.
18. Excellent. Did anybody else get 18? Or did anybody else get a different number? I'm seeing a thumbs up for 18. I'm seeing another one, another thumbs up. Excellent. All right. Some of us are still doing calculations, which is, again, not a problem. This is the first one we've done. I know involves some math. Definitely helpful to have a calculator handy when you're going through these. But while we're doing our calculations, I want to open it up for questions. Is there anything that is confusing about this? Or there's plenty of confusing things, let's be sure. Is there anything that's that feels like a overly burdensome obstacle standing in the way of our understanding? Is there anything you guys really don't understand about this? We're pretty clear? Oh, Sammy? Were you saying? Okay, no, okay. Okay.
Tammy, before you go, you did get my email, right? You are getting my emails with the class assignments. Okay.
Okay.
And you're free to,
When was the last time you sent me an email?
I'm talking about the main email I send out after the class. So did you get my email last Sunday night? Perfect.
Yeah, with the Google Doc, with the Google form?
There'll be another one coming tonight.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Great.
okay, so if you
Go
need
ahead,
to drop, that's fine. And Ariel, why don't you go for another 5-10 minutes? If you need to drop, we understand. Just make sure you look at your PDF, because we have some stuff at the end that you do need to pay attention to, starting on slide 31, I think it is. But
And
yeah,
remember,
Ariel, take another 6-7 minutes, maybe cover slide 31 to the end, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye.
Absolutely.
Hey, Noah, before you hang up, I don't have your assignment. Did you get my email?
Let me check my inbox. Which email did you send it to?
Yes.
I sent it to, I'll look it up while Ariel pulls up his slides.
Okay.
All right,
Hey,
Ariel,
Ariel,
go ahead and jump to the next one. I think we did that one.
Yep, we did. I just wanted to make sure. All right. So
We'll take 5 or 6 more minutes. So if you can hang around, we appreciate it.
Okay. And so eventually, once we get the 990 score, we'll be putting into what we call an organization review document. So we'll basically be describing the organization, its purpose, its impact. We'll review the 990s. That'll be part of our organizational review document. And we want to know, have you been personally involved with this organization in the past? And do you expect it to be involved with it in the future? So we just want to know a little bit about the organization and your involvement with it. So the Giving University Board reviews all of these submissions that we put forward at the end of this class, and they are going to have a review and decide ultimately whether or not the organization is approved for the giving that they want
And
to
I'm not sure we officially said this. I don't know if we have it in the slides or not, but we give you $1,000 grant. I think most of you know that, but in case you didn't know that, we grant $1,000 to the organization that you pick. That's score. You'll want to make sure it scores at least 16 most of the time. But I'm not sure if we have that. It's way in the back of our, I think it's lesson 5 or something. But anyway, that's why we do all this is to help you give the $1,000 we give you and to give it well.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, excellent point. So in the process, basically the GU board will be reviewing all of the submissions, and if they approve it, they'll be giving that grant of $1,000 towards the organization that you submitted the grant request for. And there's no guarantees that they're going to approve it, but they, again, with the help of Dan, especially, he knows a lot about the organizations that GU is looking for. And so come to us if you have questions about them, and we can talk through whether this is an organization that would be in line with GU's ideas. So at times we'll come back to you guys for information. That's not necessarily because they disapproved it, but they do want to make sure that they do a good job of investigating, and so sometimes they need to know a little bit more or less about an organization than what's originally given. We decided that we're going to just skip over this video, but there's a video here that you can watch in terms of fraudulent nonprofits and educating yourself about some recent news on it. So we want to be clear that we want to focus on local organizations to where you guys are. So within 100 miles of where you're currently living, these are the organizations we want you to focus on. Avoid national organizations that happen to just have a local branch. Say, for example, Habitat for Humanity, the really famous ones, the Red Cross, Ronald McDonald House, etc. These have branches all over, but they're really national organizations. They're not operating just local ones, and they most likely be far too big on the revenue side anyway. In terms of that, I think it's 60 million on the upper side. So help us learn about the organizations. We at GU want to learn more about them. So if you do have questions, we can go through those together. Yeah, do some investigation, do some digging, find out the answers to this. Your homework for this week is to find 2 or 3 local organizations, submit your 990 analysis forms for them. And you can work in pairs. Say, for example, if your brother, sister, brother, whatever, a family members, husband, wife, you can work in pairs, but you must each do your own project. So you have to do one submission for each person. Does that make sense? Okay.
And they have to be different organizations if you are working in pairs.
Thank you for clarifying. Yes.
Also, those will probably be PDFs that you submit, you send us.
Okay, guys, that is everything I have for tonight. Any final questions before we end?
Keem, are you going to send them 1 or 2 more that they can practice scoring with that we didn't get to?
Yes, I can. I can send them, or they can start pulling off of GuideStar.
Yeah, I would send them a couple that we had, because they're a little simpler to work with, and so they can get a couple under their belt.
Happy to.
But I think we had
I have a walk on water.
A walk on water. We just showed the foster care, and we had a third one also. So if you can line those up, I'd send those out.
Sounds good.
I think those would be good for everybody. Okay, any questions? This is a lot of work, a lot of stuff for one night, for sure. And